Before we get started making the salve, I wanted to show you some of the ingredients. So we've got calendula flowers right here in this jar. Calendula is really soothing for the skin. We've also got chickweed, which is wound healing and anti-inflammatory. I don't have andrographis and plantain, but plantain is really soothing for the skin and also acts as a drawing agent. Andrographis is antimicrobial and especially great for tick bites, as it stimulates your immune system. I've also got the olive oil over here, which is an antioxidant and helps prevent aging. I've got beeswax pellets here. Beeswax is going to be what makes the salve harden, so it's not just a liquid oil. It's also wound healing and generally protective of the skin. Got activated charcoal, which is black and can stain your clothes, so be careful. But it's a drawing agent. It's also pore cleansing, antibacterial, and antifungal. I've got the bentonite clay here, which is a gray powder. It's really good for generally pulling toxins out of the skin. And last, I've got lavender and tea tree essential oils. So lavender is really good for soothing the skin. It's also anti-inflammatory and wound healing. And tea tree oil is antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory. With essential oils, you just use a little bit and you usually dilute it into a carrier oil like coconut oil or olive oil, just because essential oils are much more concentrated. So there are our ingredients for the black drawing salve. So the first step to making an herbal salve is to make an herbal infused oil. And to begin with, you need to start with some jars, and you want to make sure they're sterilized to prevent mold from growing in your oil, so then you basically have to throw it away. So it's a really important step. So what I do is I fill a pot with water, bring it to a boil, set the jars inside, making sure they're covered by the water, and let them sit in the boiling water for 10 minutes. So the jars are boiling right now. They've been in there for about 10 minutes, so I'm going to take them out. I'm going to let them drain a little bit, and then I'm setting them in parchment paper in a pan to go in the oven. And the oven is at about 200 degrees Fahrenheit. They're going to go in for 10 minutes in order to completely dry them off, again, to prevent mold growth. Alright, I put them in, so I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes. So after the jars were in the oven for 10 minutes, I took them out, let them cool a little bit. Here's my jar. So the next step is filling the jar about 2/3 full with the herbs. I'm going to use lavender, but this recipe calls for chickweed, calendula, plantain, and andrographis, all really great herbs for the skin. Lavender is as well. So I'm going to fill it 2/3 full. Now I'm going to cover it with olive oil. And you want there to be about an inch of oil above the herbs, just so you make sure they are well covered. You don't want any herbs sticking out because that can cause your oil to mold, and then you have to throw everything out. So let it seep down a little bit into the herbs. You might need to add a little bit more. Great. Now that it's topped off, I'm going to use a little piece of wax paper to cover it. I'm going to put the lid on. And I'm going to add a label that I've already made. You want to include basically the ingredients, so lavender and olive oil, and the date, just so you know in the future when it's going to be ready. So now I'm going to let this sit for 4 to 6 weeks. And the next step, I'll show you how to actually strain the herbs out of the oil using a few herbs that I've been infusing for about 5 weeks. So my jar with chickweed, yarrow, calendula, and meadowsweet has been sitting in olive oil for about 5 weeks. So what I'm going to do is strain it out using a nut milk bag. You can also use cheesecloth or a fine mesh strainer. So I'm going to do it over this bowl. Okay. So I'm gonna take it, I'm gonna really squeeze the oil out as much as I can. Might have to do it a few times to really get all of the oil out. Okay, and so the herbs left in the strainer can be composted or discarded. So I have my oil in the bowl. I'm gonna take it, I'm gonna set it on top of this small pot, which has about 1 inch of water inside, and I'm gonna bring it to a gentle simmer. So like medium low. And I'm going to add in a tablespoon of beeswax. And I'm gonna keep stirring it. It's gonna take a few minutes for it to really get mixed in. Now that my beeswax is thoroughly mixed in with my oil, I'm going to turn the stove off. I'm going to remove it from heat, and I'm gonna pour it into a new bowl. Next, I'll be adding in a few drops each of lavender essential oil, tea tree oil, and 2 tablespoons each of activated charcoal and bentonite clay. And the activated charcoal and bentonite clay are really the drawing agents for the salve. So they're gonna help with any bites you have. If you have any splinters, they're gonna help draw those out. All right, 1 tablespoon. And a 2nd tablespoon. Great. Now that I have all of the ingredients, I'm gonna stir it again and make sure it's really thoroughly mixed. And once it is thoroughly mixed, I'm going to let it sit for a few minutes. As the beeswax cools, it's going to harden up, so it won't be a total liquid anymore. From there, I'm going to pour it into these tins. They're like the classic tin for salves in herbalism, but you could also use a jar or any kind of container that has a lid that will seal it on. Now that I've been stirring it for a few minutes and just letting it sit to cool a bit, it's ready to pour into the tins. It's still kind of a liquid. Also, just be careful because it is black and the activated charcoal can stain your clothes and just be messy. So just be careful as you pour it into whatever you choose to use. Okay, now that it's in the tins, you can just let it sit for a few minutes like this. It could take half an hour, maybe an hour, but the salve will start to harden up as the beeswax cools, and then you have your salve ready. So it's been about 30 minutes since I poured the salve into the tins. As you can see, it's become pretty solid. It's not gonna run over the side, so I can put the lid on and start storing it away. And salve in general is really good for cuts, scrapes, burns, and you can use it like an ointment. This one specifically with the activated charcoal and bentonite clay is going to be a really great drawing salve for like insect bites, splinters, if you get glass or another object stuck in your skin. You can put it on for 48 hours and try to get like the splinter out, and it can be super helpful. To use it, you can just take a little bit on your finger, put it on a cut or a scrape. Say I have a scrape here, and then put a band-aid on top so you don't stain your clothes. And that's it. A couple other things to note about salves. Don't forget to label it, so you at least want to include what's inside it and the date that you made it. So I went ahead and labeled this one with all of the ingredients, the date. And the other thing is that they last about 6 months or up to a year in the refrigerator. So I hope that you have the chance to make one. It's a really amazing process, and they are really nice to have on hand.